The first tap of a conductor's wand. The first rivet in a mile-high tower. The master link at the genesis of a never-ending chain. The moment a single empty canvas meets a singular master stroke. There is no one thing. Because now, there are many. Because soon, there will be more. Because one is ever the beginning. Like the first link in an infinite chain, or the first rivet in the tallest skyscraper. The master stroke is found in the masterpiece. What will you begin?
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to episode 91 of the World Blockchain Roundtable, the station that reaches the beaches. Our hosts for today are Lisa Mighty Davis, Team Mighty organizer and owner of the Mighty Lair on Den.social, Dave, the Den.social Grand Poobah and Master of Ceremonies for just about everything that happens on the platform. Myself, I'm here. I guess I'm reading a list right now. You guys know that, but so I should probably be down on the list, right? Anyway, Satoshi Sean may join us, and we've got I Am For I Am, Master Agorist, longtime friend of the show and creator of lessmoneyinpolitics.org. Check that out, guys, when you get a chance. It's super cool. How's it going, guys?
Pretty good for me. It's a good day so far. I hope that continues.
Awesome. Well, quick update from last week. Our distribution from the last episode for lot is according. So each host from last week will receive 116 lot. Topic contributors from last week will receive 38. And as last week's theme was weaponizing blockchains to fight against tyranny, was nominated by you, I Am. You will get that 38 lot. So these ownership tokens, as always, come with perpetual passive income, free edits on Den.social, and governance votes in all of the various and many things that go on Den. So definitely worth having. And if you guys are watching this and you're planning to ask questions, or you haven't asked them yet, but you're going to, be sure to follow the channel, set that alarm bell, and share it widely, because the distribution depends on how far it goes. So help us boost it and help yourself. That's how this works. So today, I think we have a little bit of extra news too. There's March themes to vote on. So if you go in the World Blockchain Roundtable DAO layer, you can see the themes in the governance section, and the vote needs to be in by Monday. So check that out. But today we've already got a theme, and that is pros and cons of state governments leveraging blockchain. That was nominated by Dave. So before we get into that, though, I think there's a lot of current events to discuss. So hey, guys, what's on your mind?
Yeah, this is going to be great, because I've put on the blinders for like the last 2 weeks, because I've been trying to focus on stuff instead of getting distracted so much, which actually makes this segment more interesting for me. So I get to find out some stuff. The last thing I heard about was all the balloons and stuff, man. What's happened since the balloons?
Dear God.
The trains.
The trains. I do know about the trains.
Yeah.
Why so many trains? That seems weird, right?
Yeah.
Well,
why are they all carrying?
It could be availability bias. We actually have 1,000 train wrecks in the United States every year.
Thank you. It's like 1,500 every year. So it's almost,
But do they all have
days in a year, right? How many train wrecks a day on average, right?
But do they all have toxic chemicals that cause like atomic bomb looking?
That shit in Ohio is crazy, right?
That was a screwed up thing. I still don't know why they did that.
It's the only one, though.
Well, that's the only one that particular mushroom cloud of black stuff happened. That blew my mind. That was crazy.
Well, the images of it, I think, made that great. But the thing to remember here is these are all procedures governed by EPA regulations, which largely pass authority on to state officials. So Ohio state officials are the ones behind the quick decision to do what they call in the regulations a controlled release. And a controlled release typically means they punch a hole in the tanker dump it onto the ground into a pre-excavated pit and light it on fire like a burn pit in Iraq or Afghanistan.
And then tell everyone it's safe. Go back. Come home. No, don't worry that your throat's burning and the fish are dead and your pets are dying. You're safe.
There are also robust rules for redefining safe, so that they can make sure that safe does not mean the same thing as back to normal.
Right.
Yeah, and then so like burning it off though, right? So you've got what was it? Vinyl chloride burned off into the atmosphere, and now it's what is that, like hydrochloric acid or something? What does that end up as once you burn it? Acid rain? No, like what do we have?
It's a very good question. I have no idea what.
I'm no chemist and I'm no NTSB expert, but it is pretty much standard protocol to try to dump it into a ravine next to the tracks, from what I understand, and set it ablaze to get it out and quick. They were concerned that a large explosion was going to happen or be probable, and it would create more damage and it would still release the toxins. So I don't think they had a choice. I'm completely wrong about lighting it.
I don't know what else to say.
The issue I have, to be honest with you, and I am certainly no union supporter, shall we say, but the union had talked about you're putting too many cars on behind one engine or a group of engines, and this kind of thing is going to happen. And we haul toxic chemicals all the time. So this was kind of a high probability event, I would say, that got worse and worse and worse. And Greg, you're absolutely right. I mean, this falls kind of under the state jurisdiction, and then Norfolk Southern, I think, is the railroad. And of course, what do they want? They want to get these tracks cleared ASAP so they can keep those trains rolling and flowing. So they're kind of coaxing, Ohio, this is how you should handle, this is what you should do. And it just turned into a big cluster, what.
Yeah, well, the crazy thing is they had phosgene on there, and I'm surprised more people aren't talking about that one, because phosgene, for students of history, will remember that it was a popular weapon used in World War I trench warfare before they outlawed the use of chemical weapons. Before that became a war crime. So the fact that was was one of the cars, and that was one of the things that they lit on fire. Like, I definitely understand the desire to get rid of that vinyl chloride stuff. That stuff is nasty. But at the same time, consulting that community, having a DAO-like structure as opposed to a command and control-like structure may have changed the entire decision field. Like, we don't even know what the community
decides that they want to do with it.
And these people who sort of came to the community said, we're doing this to the people in charge, and then told them to evacuate the town without even probably with telling them not to explain it to the townspeople.
Lisa had a good point a minute ago. Lisa, you asked the question, like, how common is it to be carrying all of these chemicals around like this on train cars all the time? I imagine it's pretty common. I don't know though for sure, but like, is it pretty common that like anytime you see a bunch of train cars moving down the tracks, that there's a bunch of industrial chemicals in there, and you better hope that you're not around if something happens?
Tank cars, man. That's mostly what's in them.
Well, and I had heard that the inspections weren't done on it correctly, as well as there was something about there's some blocks or some kind of safety or security things that are put in place, like outside of cities, that were supposed to be in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening, that weren't in place, kind of, setting up for something like this to happen in that area. So,
well, I mean, to me, the biggest issue here is we've already seen, like, you guys are aware of the phenomenon where, like, you open the paper and because you're an expert in X, Y, Z, or whatever, and there's a story about it and you read it, you're like, well, they got that wholly fucking wrong. What's going on here, really? Because that story can't be true. And the way that these regulators are doing things is bass backwards. And what the fuck? Why are people not mad about this? Just because they're not experts in that. And then they turn the page and see a story about something they have no idea about, and they forget that they disbelieved the last one. Well, what I'm concerned about is, where do these regulations come from anyway? How do they define safety? Because as we know, safe and effective is something that depends highly on who's paying your salary when you're a regulator.
Right. Didn't we just figure out we don't trust them?
Yeah.
Right.
So we're turning the page and going, oh, I mean, the allegedly rational position here is to say it's not as big of a deal as people think. Calm down, everybody. It's okay. This is normal. But
it's like the CCP handbook was turned to. It says, "Oh, this is what we need to say." Yeah, right here. It's
right.
okay. It's okay. Look over here, balloons. No, I don't.
Yeah, and that's not leadership. That's not that's not governance or leadership or any of that.
No. And one other thing too is government always lags behind of technology and slow to react. And then you throw in poor leadership on top of that, another part of the cluster F. It's just it's tragic because we don't know what these long-term effects are going to be. Groundwater, the water table that's flowing down to the Mississippi, all of this, the Ohio River, everything it's just going to be, and think about the first responders. What are we talking about? Are we talking about the 9 and that those two numbers together? I don't know if we can say it anymore, but are we talking about a first responder problem that we're going to see again? And the lawyers and attorneys, they're already gearing up. They're cracking their knuckles saying, oh yeah, big money here, we're going to start suing here and suing there, and that's just going to slow the process of figuring out how bad things are, because then people get tight-lipped, they don't want to talk, including government officials, and we're in the dark even longer.
They're having the people that are testing, they're having the people that live there, they have to sign a waiver to have their home water tested, saying they will not sue the trains and the government or the companies.
Horrible.
So if you want help, you have to say that you're going to sign away your rights to hold anyone accountable.
Otherwise, you got to hire your own testing independently, and
I guess you got to figure it out yourself. This goes back to where we are with the whole sovereign immunity thing with our fearless leaders that are supposed to be looking out for our best interest. If if your word is worth nothing, if you are put in a position of leadership authority and supposed to be protecting those that you are serving, but there's no way that you can be held accountable in your own courts, then you have free reign to do whatever. It's just a really dangerous position. And that's what they did with Big Pharma. That's what we're looking at with our congressmen and women right now that have sovereign immunity, that aren't beholden to even the Constitution that they say they take an oath to. And now we're in this situation with these people, looking for help to keep their family, their children safe from the water. Oh, sure, it's the fish are dead and your dog just died, but I'm sure it's fine to turn on the tap water and have a drink.
Well,
it kind of reminds me of as a teenager. I remember, let's go out in the woods and create a fire. We used to do that. We used to, create a nice big fire or something, keep warm as teenagers, right?
Oh yeah.
And we were responsible. But then every once in a while, I was like, hey, let's throw a big log on here. Yeah, watch it burn. And then we realized, whoa, this is too big. And I kind of feel like that's exactly what happened here. We had teenagers in control. And so, we'll just light a fire and burn it off. And then they're looking up at the sky and saying, oh, my gosh, it's like a mushroom cloud. This is huge.
Right. Yeah. I don't have an example right now, but I saw photos from space or from above the clouds. And it was like, it looked like this big, portal to hell coming through the clouds.
You can see a big black ring over the top of it. And now the cloud, the plume of it is blowing over 3 states, and you can actually measure the chemicals as far away as Maine at this point.
Blowing over all the states, and like I am said, eventually going into the Mississippi and down through all of that watershed all the way out to the Gulf too, and holy crap.
And that affects the majority of water supply.
The woo-woo part is, how about that Netflix? In Ohio, a train derailment. There was a movie that came out in Ohio. And then there's something else that was kind of
the people who made that movie lived.
The majority of the extras live in that town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a trip. And the thing that bugs me about all of this is when you start to really dig into the way that we handle toxic chemicals in this country, this isn't out of the ordinary. This isn't. This is just a highlighted example of the sorts of shenanigans that people tasked with this get up to from time to time, every other week or so, right? This is our policy. We do things like create zones where it's acceptable to have higher than average, acceptable levels of these chemicals, and the acceptable levels themselves are subject to political gamesmanship. What I want to know is what they're trying to distract us from with this. Is what I want to know about. And I think it has to do a lot more with the fact that a very reputable investigative journalist, Cy Hirsch, just announced a new story. And by the way, go check him out on Substack if you guys haven't seen it. That the United States planned a pretty intensive op with, was it the Dutch as partners, or
Norway? I think
Norway,
Norway
as
right?
partners in blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines.
Yeah,
where they like planted charges that were on a trigger based on a sonar profile that they could send from a sonic buoy.
So
I
Norway,
didn't read the full text of that, but I did see that. Yeah, and it makes me wonder like how people are going to dismiss it. That's my first thing. Is like, okay, like you said, reputable journalist. How soon before that person becomes unreputable?
Oh, it's already happened.
Biden admitted it or talked about it from one of his magical podiums. And they said, well, how are you going to do that? And he said, don't worry about it. I can do it.
Yeah. Oh, he absolutely said it was going to happen. And then it happened. Of course.
And what's her name? Nolan, from the State Department as well, that was all involved in the whole Ukraine coup in 2014. Victoria Nuland. I believe she had also said something too about the pipeline. So, but kind of in the show's topic, I don't know if a blockchain can make government react faster, because you still have possibly not the brightest minds in control of, say, a disaster like this. Let's, picking on Ohio, but this could happen anywhere. We could have the same kind of ugly train that could, the spill over in Houston or Louisiana or California. Who knows? It could.
I think one of the things that it could do is it could help direct the appropriate or the qualified or the equitable inputs to decision making. In other words, like whenever someone who is supposed to be representative of a community or an area has to make a decision on what to do, it could streamline the process of getting inputs from people that you can count on as being like, okay, either a constituent or a resident or a qualified party or somebody who knows what they're talking about. That could be helpful.
So this is definitely one that I think we should come back to as a living example when we get onto the show's topic. But I had another current event that I think is probably worth bringing up. I don't know how closely you guys have been tracking what the good folks over at our neighborhood-friendly securities regulator and power grabber operation have been up to. But Gary Gensler, man, is a fucking piece of work. Sorry for my bomb, but that has to be said. Like, I was doing a little bit of Dan hacking of GPT the other day.
Really?
Asking about Gary Gensler. And I don't know, because obviously this thing can be sometimes factually inaccurate, and I can't find a whole lot of direct information on it, but it feels like something that has been scrubbed from the internet when you start to search for it. Gary Gensler may have actually been the man behind the creation of credit default swaps on mortgage-backed securities.
I think I heard something.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? That would be interesting.
So here we have this guy, like Captain Credit Default Swap, possibly, allegedly. According to Dan, right? Our good friend at ChatGTP when it's unlocked. And he's involved in what's ostensibly an attempt to destroy crypto, right? Staking is an investment contract, my shiny red fire truck, right? Like that's nuts.
He also put out.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yes, somebody in chat was talking about Gensler just now also. And he tweeted yesterday and about, now I don't fully understand this kind of stuff, but basically reducing. Is this the one he was talking about, reducing the from 2 days to 1 day? The what do you call it? I'm so not versed in this stuff, but here's what they were asking about. Proposed to expand and enhance the role of qualified custodians when registered investment advisors custody assets on behalf of investors.
Yep.
So what do you know about that? Greg, I'm especially interested because, like,
Well,
I don't know, you just seem to have your finger on the pulse of this.
and this is something that, like, there's a word that I like to use that still doesn't have a decent dictionary definition, even though you can put them together and it's a valid word. Disintermediation. To me, that is a more important term than decentralization, because decentralization is what causes it, right? It's easier to say decentralization, but what we're really after is taking middlemen out of the picture because they are corrupt by nature, right? Power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, that's what happens with middlemen, especially when the government likes to reach in and monkey with them in order to either enforce laws and conscript policemen of private enterprise, or engage in efforts to hide things that happen, right? And that to me is what this is all about. But it's also about trying to set the stage and set the plate for the ultimate outlawing of self-custody wallets. Right. We saw Elizabeth Warren put forth legislation last session, where she attempted in this law to define self-hosted cryptocurrency wallets, i.e., MetaMask or Encrypt, or whichever one you like to use. Right. Open source code meant to run open source software. She wants to define them as money transmitter businesses.
Yeah, I really want to like her. I do. I try. But every time I read something that she has put out about something that I obviously know more about than her, which is sad, it's either maybe I'm wrong though, right? Either she doesn't understand it or she does understand it, and both of those are problems, because when you read what's written and put out for a vote, what she wants to pass as law, it's not written in a way that makes any fucking sense.
Is it just me though, or does she come off? I mean, to me, she comes off as power hungry. Like, the thing that she doesn't like about it is the disintermediation, because if you take that away, then you take away the importance of people who regulate middlemen.
Right.
That could be it, because that's definitely a governance style. That is a personality type. Like, I will keep everything together. Kind of like
somebody who'd be in danger of being a strongman dictator.
Right. I'm gonna make sure everything works the way it needs to work because I say it is, and I have all the power, and that's how it works. That's just a type of person, a type of governance, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's how she vibes, and it's what her legislation reads like. So I think even if you want to like her, you got to put two and two together eventually.
Yeah. Well, she talks a lot of big talk about things that she doesn't actually write, or she writes a lot of things that are contradictory.
I was going to say, I don't know that she actually writes them. I think she's the presenter or the face, which is why she sounds so ignorant when she speaks, because she's just using talking points that she really doesn't back up. Those aren't her own thoughts.
But it works.
How familiar are you guys with the way that legislation gets written?
Oh, I'm not. I mean, I understand a bit. I understand that many times it's written by companies coming in with a suggestion.
Well, it's actually not quite right.
The lobbyist
interesting
brings in what they want.
Is every state and the federal government as well has an office that is an administrative agency that belongs not to the executive branch, but to the legislature. Mm-hmm. And I know all about this because I actually worked for the agency that did this for Indiana. I mean, these are people who are lawyers who are some of the best and brightest they can get to do this right out of school. They're interested in legislation. They're interested in public policy. And they end up at, at least in Indiana, for example, they end up at an agency called the Legislative Services Agency. And I worked in the technology group there, helping them build software to draft this legislation before I left that to build things that would ultimately take a little bit of that power away. But the worst part about it is these are people who are really smart, genuinely want to help, and will write whatever their bosses say. And
naive. They're very naive. They're fresh out of college.
Some of them are. Some of them have been there for a long time. I mean, these people really do care, but they care about things in a context that if you care about them that way, you can get that job. Sort of like journalism, right?
Right.
Noam Chomsky's critique of if you have certain thoughts about the way things ought to be, then you don't end up in the chair you're sitting in. It's very true with that group.
Mm-hmm.
It's a monolithic bunch. It's people of a certain mindset end up there. And that's not to say that they're bad people. It's just to say that the things that they're willing to do as legal representatives of the legislature include things like taking calls from lobbyists that the legislator wants to have them help draft a bill on. So they'll use state money, right, to help lobbyists write the legislation to have the effect they want it to have, which to me is a moral hazard, even if the people that are doing it are good people, right?
Right. And then there's if correct me if I'm wrong too, Greg, you have then the representative that or their staff that's interacting with this group and stating, well, to get this passed, it needs to include A, B, and C, and make sure that D is not in this because it won't pass. Right. And then all of that comes out, and then in committee they're debating about the A, B, C, and D that's included in that legislation. And the lobbyist is pushing the representative, hey, make sure the A, B, and C is in this thing, and we don't want D.
Right. Well, I mean, and in Indiana, that would actually happen in closed doors caucus meetings, right? Like that was actually not even committee. It was like a special meeting they would all go to where even legislative services wasn't allowed inside. They'd come out of their black box with changes, and we didn't know what they were for.
That's right. And my point was that once it's in committee, then there are going to be groups that are still going to argue about A, B, C, and D because there was a fight to get all four of those elements in the bill. Right.
That's a puppet theater part. Right. The things they already know aren't going in are nonetheless going to be debated.
Right.
So I've seen in like two interesting circumstances times when the script was deviated from. One circumstance was kind of ongoing in the Senate over there, and there was just one legislator that wouldn't play ball. Like he was just going to try to blow the system open. Everybody hated his guts and talked shit on him because he tried to break their system of secrecy. But the other time was a weird time in the House of Representatives where like this fact came out about somebody's personal interest in an outcome for a piece of legislation that would ban like chicken farms for small farmers or make them install really expensive bathrooms that they didn't need or something like that. Point being, they stick to the script 99.99% of the time. So with blockchains, right, we have an opportunity, I think, to inject the right kind of transparency, right? And it's not so much, I think we'll get back to this when we get into the topic here in a moment, but it's not so much what they decide to put their process on. It's what they do to the process once it's transparent and once it's immutable. So,
if I could make one other quick comment, if we circle back real quick before we move on to the topic on Gary Gensler. I've always felt that he was certainly anti-crypto, but why is more along the lines of he's still the puppet.
Oh yeah,
there's people that are pulling the strings, and they knew that they could probably, because of his past.
They would have some favors after MF Global
affiliations, and
that he was elevated to that position, already bought and paid for.
Yeah, because Jay Clayton
he was going to work for. Yes, Lisa.
Jay Clayton and who's the other guy even before him?
John Corzine.
Is it? Maybe I'm thinking of a guy after him. Then anyway, I know Jay Clayton was in when they went after Reggie. And so, this has been going on for a long time. It's been about, and to me, when you look at, who the powers that be, whose children have been selling secrets to China, and then, they're stifling innovation through things like the SEC and pushing our innovation in America to other places, and you look at where their children are working and who their children are being paid by, what's going on here and who really is in charge of this country, and that's where it starts making sense. And that's where, maybe not everybody's paying attention right now, but if we were using blockchain, there would be proof and people could look back and say, wait, A, B, C, and it would be a
Right.
provable
Well, you could
blockchain.
have-
History proves that.
You could essentially have a verified fact that nobody can say, well, hold on a second there, we need to research this.
Right.
You can post a link to Block Explorer and prove it, so long as what it is constitutes full proof, right? Like, and I think that's the biggest part about state governments, right? Like, the things they need to be putting on there are really the devil that's going to be in the details, and we need to make sure that that we have the attention spans, muster our attention spans, and
The
push them to our
contracts, the
limits,
payments. Yeah.
things like that, and probably more. Some things that that even someone like me who worked in the technology part of one of those legislative administrative agencies was kept from, right? Like, the one thing that would get you in trouble there from the technology side of things, from my standpoint, one of the things that got me in trouble there, and I had to leave, was they didn't like you clicking around in drives you didn't belong in. They didn't want you to know what everything was going on, right? Like, they wanted you to know what you needed to know and not a whole lot more. And they kept track of you to make sure that you stayed in your stovepipe.
Dave talked about that, that's like in the military world that, and Dave can probably do a better job explaining this than me, but that the higher you get in security clearance, the less you know about everything else. And that's part of keeping everything secure, because
Right.
if you know a lot about one thing, then you could be really dangerous if you know anything about anything else. And I don't know that I do a good job.
That's fair.
Explaining that.
It's a common misconception that, like, the higher your security clearance goes, the more access to stuff that you have. It doesn't work that way.
It's necessary but not sufficient to have the big picture.
Right. So, for example, I was a Tomahawk cruise missile guy in the Navy, and I had a TS-SCI clearance, which is like a special compartmentalized top secret clearance.
Mm-hmm.
And although, I had access to information that was highly secretive and highly, like, dangerous if it got in the wrong hands, kind of thing, I only had access to very, very specific information that had to do with our mission or with planning or with, some kind of operational requirement in the theater that we were in or something like that. It wasn't.
Were they being watched also being watched to make sure you didn't step outside of your stovepipe?
Interestingly enough, no, because this was pre-Manning.
Okay.
And really, when Manning stole all of the diplomatic cables and stuff from the same system that I was accessing for Tomahawk stuff to send mission data back and forth, right? Back then, there weren't any, right? They didn't. I mean, I don't know how else to say it except to say that the military technology that's operational, it is not changed or updated unless there's an absolute requirement to do so. So until that happened, we were still able to have removable media. We were still able to have thumb drives. She used a rewritable CD-ROM.
Really?
Labeled,
a CDRW. Interesting.
CDRW. It was labeled Lady Gaga, and went in and put it in and put headphones on and was lip syncing to Lady Gaga, but there was no music playing. It was copying stuff. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So once it was, like, discovered how that extraction happened, that kind of thing. Snowden used removable media whenever
he had
exfiltrated stuff from the NSA.
clearance, which is, like, super unreal. Like, he got somehow authorization to build a program that indexed all the stovepipes. Like,
Snowden, Snowden.
That was
Snowden
some
had
crazy shit. I don't know how
Snowden he directly had. That's a whole different story. If you want to know about Snowden's methods, he wrote about it extensively in Permanent Record.
In his book.
Permanent Record. Yeah,
you can definitely
really good read. Excellent read. Talks about his motivations, his life, stuff like that. But more to the point, the compartmentalized part of security clearance is very real. You don't fucking know what's going on. In fact, I didn't. Part of the reason I left. To get a little personal was whenever I did take a field trip to a place where a lot of the planning on unrelated things were happening, and I did get to see, like, oh, okay, this shit's a little bit weird. I don't know if I want to be a part of this anymore, right? And so I think that a part of that is designed to keep people from understanding the scope of what they're involved with and how it's being applied broadly, because you might end up finding out that people have a problem with it after they know more of a scope of what's going on. You know what I mean? So yeah, security clearances don't mean shit. It just means you know a lot about a little tiny bit.
Right. They show you the backside of the puzzle piece that you're supposed to help cut. But you don't know what's on the picture on the front of it if you don't need to know it. And you don't know why you're cutting into the shape you're cutting in because you can't see the pieces adjacent. Right.
Shout out to Crypto Tommy in the YouTube chat. I think he nails it. From an IT standpoint, think of clearance as authentication and need to know as authorization.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good one. That is a really good one.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, very
Thanks,
smart.
Tommy.
We'll have to like put that quote in into a separate tweet or something about this episode.
Authentication and authorization.
Put your ad handle in there or something. It's like we should share.
And then
that.
we'll eternalize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So at that, I think it's probably a good time to move on to the questions. You guys think?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see what we got. I actually haven't gone through. I've been working on something else on DIN, and I haven't read over them first. So I'll be answering cold here today.
Yep. I'm coming in hot from the cold standpoint as well. So. Yep. Okay. So we have at the very top Jacob Wayne with a really cool game over that looks like the game over screen from Contra, if I'm not mistaken. Because that screen, man, I don't know if you guys ever played Contra, but
game over, man.
Yeah, unless you use the Konami code, you're going to see that a lot. So the question is, if the government successfully overrides all decentralized blockchain efforts, and the general population considers blockchain to be synonymous with centralized control, do you think it's game over? Okay, that's a good question.
Excellent question.
What do you guys think?
I don't think it's possible.
Well,
I don't think it's possible. I mean, Brad Garlinghouse has already made the bold statement of like, look, whether the SEC, whether we win or lose in the United States, Ripple goes on.
Mm-hmm.
We're already successful in the rest of the world. The rest of the world is not the United States. The United States thinks they are the whole world, but they're not. So I don't think it's possible. Yeah. I don't think there's a gun that big.
That's a good point. Because like what Lisa just said, the United States thinks they're the whole world, but they're not. A lot of people in the United States think that's the whole world. It's pretty common to just not think about the rest of the world being different, with different rules and regulations and different governments and things like that. At least today, right now, we don't have a one world government. But it's naive if we're talking about the U.S. government to do shit like that, because it's just going to push innovation elsewhere. You're already seeing it with, like Ripple said, they're just going to be elsewhere. You're creating economic competition for yourself when you don't need to be. You could be the competition instead, but that's not the way that we're approaching this, and that's not the environment that we're creating here.
Let me, if I could interject here real quick. I think two words stick out here: population considers. So this is talking about a narrative, propaganda, definitions of terms and wording. So if blockchain is synonymous with centralized control, which it isn't, it can't be, that's to Lisa's point, but the propaganda might lead people to believe that, blockchain is bad, blockchain is evil, blockchain is wrong, and have no understanding of the mechanics and how it works and what it can do or can't do. And therefore, that is where that's where they win. That's where it's game over in this respect from this question, which I love, is that the perception of the public becomes, the negative. It's looking at blockchain as a negative.
Yeah, a phrase I hate, but is also true, is perception is reality. To a lot of people, that is, the case. Yep. And, we were talking about Elizabeth Warren earlier, and that's a really good example of this sort of demonstrably false messaging that's put out to people, and they just eat it up, because she was one of the first ones to come out after the FTX fraud was exposed to say, see, this is why we got to crack down on this crypto stuff. Yeah. And it's completely, it's good old fashioned fraud. It's regular ass fraud. It's not,
it's not crypto.
And it's
Well,
and then they weren't using crypto to secure anything, because if they had been, they wouldn't be allowed to do what they did, or they wouldn't technically be able to do what they did if they had been properly.
So
Yeah, the crypto part exposed what they were doing
Right,
instead
right.
of
It actually made it come out sooner than it would have otherwise in all likelihood, is a good
Mhm.
theory. And I think that if you really look at the details of it, that will emerge later as sort of the definitive in once we see the case happen and they present a lot of blockchain data and Chainalysis is up there as their star witnesses. I think what you're gonna see is people going, well, how did they know all this stuff? Because they don't usually give us this much detail. Like, they're probably going to be some serious efforts to curtail what goes into the public record. Like, they're going to probably try,
and they'll be orange pilled by it.
Try to seal. Yeah, I mean, but if you look at the way they're going to prove this case against SBF, what's going to happen is they're going to bust out the blockchain and lynch him with it. That he will not be able to prove otherwise, because they're going to have timestamps of exactly when he did stuff, exactly how he did it, and then he's going to be forced to answer why.
I'm a little black pilled on that one. I hope that's the outcome, and it's certainly the information, the data should be there to be able to present that.
Yeah.
If
he decides to kill himself,
I'm not hopeful. He paid off too many people in high places to keep it quiet. Basically, everything he's done, or they have done, include the whole family and everyone connected, is just another Epstein list, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I'm with you there. We'll see if blockchain makes the difference, because it just may.
Right.
Now, even if it doesn't,
it's what a great teaching moment, right, for everybody. Yeah. And for
even
that,
if it doesn't,
sometimes I hate to use the word normies, but it's a great teaching moment. And that actually speaks to this question. It's game over if they win this, population considers.
Yeah, that's the part that concerns me.
Technically, Lisa's right, though. It's impossible in the true sense of blockchain.
Yeah. The question is, will they turn it into a new BitTorrent, right? Where it's going to be sort of this isolated thing that people are afraid to touch because of its
maybe
its
people
decentralized
associate
implications. Right?
Yeah,
lack of education.
Minimize us and push us to the side, so that people who choose to be free can in fact be free, but people are afraid to make the choice.
But I think
that's probably the biggest worry.
Yeah, with CBDCs rolling out, people are going to see the centralization and say, well, how, but I don't understand. And how was this able to be shown and that not? Like, I think that's where that awakening and that education, the difference of those two things will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's got to be done in a way that's going to sound, people need to be watchful for, we're trying to keep its good type language around this, because that's exactly what they're going to pull out. They're going to lead people to CBDC as politely and as helpfully and as we're just doing our jobs, ma'am. We're just doing our jobs, sir, as they can. And then once you're in that system,
we're from the government, and we're here.
Once you're in the system, once the train door slams shut, so to speak, that's when they'll start being rude about it, because they won't have to be polite anymore to be coercive.
Yeah, if you can get it into the hearts and minds of people that anything other than a state-sanctioned cryptocurrency CBDC is dirty money somehow, then you don't actually have to win on a technical basis.
Right.
And that's the part that concerns me, because we're already seeing that happen with the way that certain fraudulent activities have been exposed as representative of all of crypto and blockchain and stuff, where people will commonly, like, it's not uncommon for me to hear people say things like, oh, crypto, that was such a scam, wasn't it? That kind of thing. And it is, I would say it is technically possible to go that route, because you can have centralized blockchains. You can have, like,
it's called proof of authority.
Centralization. I mean, have you ever seen that meme that has a whole bunch of pictures of CZ and it says select all of the validators of Binance Smart Chain kind of thing? You know what I mean? It's a blockchain, but it's not really that decentralized. If they can sort of anytime you see somebody halting it because of a fraudulent, we halted the blockchain because of some fraud we're trying to work out.
Yeah.
It's like,
Now,
all right, I don't know.
I will say the
yeah.
following, and this is why there's a lot of good reason to have hope here on this. Just as ever, when you have government bureaucrats trying to fight a war, they're always fighting the last war. And whenever you have government bureaucrats trying to regulate technology, they're always regulating the technology that they learn about from 5 years ago. Right? The space is moving so fast that new applications that, frankly, none of us know are possible yet are going to emerge. Like one of the newest ones I've become familiar with is Lit protocol, which is not going to be some kind of DeFi thing. It's going to be a self-sovereign identity thing. And it's going to work fundamentally similarly, but it's also going to be unimpeachable on the standpoint of the people pushing this are just greedy. Because it's not about making money. It's literally about freeing you. It's about proving who you are and what you say you can do or what you say you're going to do without revealing your identity. Right.
I think that, stuff like that, I haven't read up on this. I'll look it up later after the show, but things continue to be developed that are very useful and innovative. Yeah. And that's going to continue happening, even if we do get into the situation where, if you want to call people normies or the average person, doesn't understand what's going on and doesn't understand what's possible or opts not to use it because they think it's bad or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it probably, with decentralization, and I haven't even thought about it in this context until just now, but it seems like along with decentralization, it creates a different environment where people are now, like, the impetus is on the individual to educate themselves. Whereas if they don't do that, they're going to just use whatever they're told to use and whatever they've learned to use from the TV.
With the exception of, like, you guys remember when Napster first came out, though, right? Mm-hmm. It was like this user-friendly thing that made it so you could just go get music. And it wasn't used, at least by the people that I knew, to get, like, the most popular songs of the day. It was used to learn about and explore artists that you'd never heard of, that didn't make it on your radio station, that didn't make it to your record store, that normally would have been gate kept out of your awareness altogether. I mean, that was
or
the power
for distribution.
Of that tech, but
if you're a band, if you're making music and you want to give people access to it, say, oh, like I remember going to, I think it was like MagFest, Mid-Atlantic Gamer Festival up in somewhere around Norfolk. And I was listening to a band that was like playing, I'd never heard of them before. I thought they were cool, but part of their show was you can find our music on the Pirate Bay, and they were proud of that. They were like, go check us out, And
that is true. But what the crazy thing, what the point I was trying to make is actually this. While all of that was going on, the high level prognosticators, the expert class that we should always not be trusting to the best of our abilities when we can spot them. These guys were saying the future of the internet is going to be like cable TV, but online. Like they thought you were going to get websites the way that you subscribed to packages of channels, right? They thought that it was going to be information augmented TV, where you could buy what the people were wearing on your favorite regularly programmed, regularly scheduled shows. They didn't anticipate
that's
all
true.
The way that it actually turned out, right? So I think the risk to them, or the good thing for us, is that their narrative is going to outdate itself faster than they can invent a new one.
I was saying, there is a show like that.
It's interesting because it did kind of go that way.
They tried.
Even right now, think about, Web 2 sort of is an effort in that direction, where you have, it used to be like, I don't know, I feel like so many people use a half a dozen websites for everything. You know what I mean? Like that's like my Facebook channel or my Twitter channel or my.
And you see some of that packaging shit emerge with the
news that agrees with my sentiments channel, or whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can still get packages where your data is free if you're on YouTube and you sign up for this plan with Verizon or whatever.
Yeah, but early on there was you're right, there was companies that were investing in being the first to market, to be like, we're going to be one of these cable channels that are the internet provided. What is a digital entertainment network did that? That was their whole pitch, I think. To investors.
The thing they were most excited about plugging into the internet was set-top boxes, and Apple even barely figured that out after 20 years later.
Apple TV, yeah.
And they do it kind of well, but it still doesn't work like those people in the 90s imagined it would.
The second
BitTorrent.
half
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say the second half of Jacob Wayne's question is it game over? And let's talk about game over, I guess.
Yeah, what do you consider game over? Yeah.
Right. Okay, so the black pill in me, the Neil is okay, it's over, we're doomed, we're going to be slaves to tyranny, and that's kind of the game over perspective, right? And then the white pill in me says, well, no, maybe underlining, blockchain, and here you go, parallel systems is how we're going to be the undercurrent, and maybe prevent us from having a hard landing, but much more of a soft landing. And as the parallel system grows, it overtakes the
right.
The
there,
black.
There will be velvet glove tyranny in this game over scenario. There will be, and some people will labor under it because they can't conceive of opting out. It just their social connections are too embedded. They're too ensconced in the stories they've been told for their whole lives. I mean, a great example is the mask mandates, right? Kids who were 2 when those started came to consciousness thinking that was all there ever was, right? That they were required to do this, and that was all there ever was. Had that persisted for 5 more years, it would have been really hard to get people to stop wearing them.
Right. Think of that seed that was planted. It's pretty scary.
Right. So there will be, if this happens in this game over scenario, some people who live in a state that those of us who were awake going into it will opt out of immediately, and will suffer some hardships because we're going to try, and we haven't built a fully parallelized world yet.
Now, right. I from what I've kind of looked at lately and been really digging into the whole parallel societies and having it change, it's interesting because as the tyranny rises, the parallel systems also start to rise, because that's how people get around or fight against or
sometimes just survive.
Yeah, or exactly. And
if you look at
that parallel kind of rises up because more and more people are seeing people are surviving and doing, and maybe actually prospering, and they go towards that route. And then those tyrannical systems start to fade or weaken. And so that's my white pill answer to the game over scenario. And and to be honest with you, and I kind of feel I like to think of myself as more white pilled, but I may not see those solutions and that kind of thing. That could happen generations to the future.
And we've got, the great thing about it is we've got an archetype that is changing the minds of a whole generation, right? If there is one public figure, right, who is tightly embedded as a good guy in the consciousness of, and an admirable person in the consciousness of the upcoming generation, Gen Z fucking loves Elon Musk. Let's put it that way, right? There are a million Elon Musks growing up right now because of him. Right? You set an example, but the real power is going to be in the kids that come up and try to emulate that say, you know what, we're going to be what we think of as good no matter what anybody tells us. And we'll do things like have satellite internet where the government comes at us and tells us we have to allow murder drones to be run on our system, and you say no. Right. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, the ability to say no is important. The ability to say no without going to jail, without being, prosecuted for saying no is super important.
So I love Elon Musk, not because of who he is and what he does per se, but what he's inspiring in a generation of people who can choose to be like that.
I think Lisa could probably agree with me. The greed index, greed factor, and it moves up and down, or any kind of needle like that. Well, I'm kind of that way with Elon Musk.
Same.
I'm very weary of him.
The word antichrist comes to my mind.
We should all be wary of people who are inspiring, right? Because it's dangerous to have too much stock in somebody, right? I agree. Yeah. But and he does, he still hasn't given any crypto journalists access to the Twitter files, which really bothers me, because I think there's stuff hidden there that would be worth finding. I don't think that there's necessarily anything nefarious about Matt Taibbi's efforts. I think he probably read across it and just didn't know what the fuck he was reading. So
I got to check out Matt Taibbi. He did an interview with Rogan recently. I got to go check that out.
Yes, it was really good.
Was it good? Yeah, I haven't listened to it yet.
Really good.
I wanted to say my take on the game over scenario is that to me, I'm increasingly convinced that Neil Stephenson is a prophet as an author. And my neighbor recently texted me, because we swap sci-fi books back and forth, he and I. And so he recently texted me and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of an author called Neil Stephenson? I just got this one book and also Snow Crash." And I was like, "Dude, one of my top 2 favorite authors. You're going to love it. Start with Snow Crash." Snow Crash is a pretty whacked out book until you read it again in the context of today, because it really does outline this sort of game over scenario where there are parallel systems and people basically live in different universes right beside each other. Where, like one of the main characters' moms lives and works in an office and works at her computer and just does the regular thing and doesn't really is sort of just this normie character, right? While her daughter is like living in this alternative reality and using different infrastructure and using different money and using different networks for communications and stuff like that. And I think that's where the game over is. And so the game over isn't necessarily like everything is lost. I think the game over is that it's just people aren't going to want to be saved anymore. So we have to maybe just allow ourselves to let go of the idea that you're going to save the world. And if it goes to shit, just be ready to have your own kind of world to live in, right? With your own infrastructure and your own solutions and your own fair, equitable way to be a society. And I think that we just, maybe that's a metaverse thing, maybe that's maybe that's a parallel systems thing, but yeah, I just think
you
that
could argue that we have that now.
Go that direction. Yeah, we had. I think
you can argue that we have that now, because I know myself.
Sure, you can. Look at the homeless community chooses to opt out of society in most instances. If you work, I worked for years in a lot of poverty culture, inner city ministry stuff, and the majority of the people that I worked with that were in the homeless community chose to opt out of society for their belief systems. Many cases there were mental illness issues and different things, drug addiction, whatever, but they have a parallel systems of getting things done and doing things a certain way because they don't want to be in this what we would call our society or system or parallel. And if the metaverse or cryptocurrency
kind of its own metaverse, really, when you think about it.
It kind of is. That's what I'm saying. And if and even then I think of, just listening to Dave talk just a second ago, if you think of like a typical American go to work 9 to 5er versus maybe their child who's on Twitch making magical internet money, those are 2 different parallel universes. So we're already there.
Homesteaders, preppers turn homesteaders and become self-sufficient.
Yeah, I was going to say,
well, I mean, the future Martians, right?
I was going to say rednecks because that's half of my family, but you're right. Homesteaders, like, my a section of like just where I'm from. I'm proud of being from the woods, basically. Right. Where whenever I talk to like any of my friends that still live where I'm from, they're cash only on basically everything. They're trading like you said, the homesteaders, will trade eggs or deer meat,
bartering,
bartering.
But Lisa, let me ask you this though: in your experience, do those sort of splinter societies that evolve among the homeless, do they care about each other?
Yes, that's how they survive. Yeah, that's how they survive.
I think it's human nature,
community,
to rescue each other. I don't think that that will ever be able to be fully suppressed.
I don't think you survive as an individual. I think communities, really important.
We are individuals at our core, but when we're free to act, we typically choose to help rather than harm.
Yeah, I believe that.
And then I guess the other game over would be that if we're not allowed to have those parallel systems, I guess that would be the real game over, wouldn't it? Would be that
They exterminate every dissident.
If we're
Yeah,
isolated, maybe that's the game over. What Greg's point is, if we weren't allowed to choose to seek community and be together, which is what what they tried to do with the Great Infection, was isolate us all.
Lisa, do you guys want actually all three of you? You guys want to hear my my tinfoil hat theory on how they tried to accomplish this and have failed so far, but might still succeed?
Sure.
There is a phenomenon that you can see statistically. As soon as a rule exists to enforce a behavior, people sort of disavow themselves of moral responsibility. The example is in a weird place, school pickup times, where they have like a time designated for you to come pick up your kid. And if you don't show up for that, ultimately it results in a fine or a penalty of some sort, where the school voluntarily made it so that if you didn't show up on time, you were going to have to pay extra to the school for this penalty. And since it was a fine enforced pick up your kid on time, people started looking at it as a premium for a 20 to 30 minute babysitting service. And when they implemented it, they got the Cobra effect, where more parents started just leaving their kids there and coming to school with their checkbooks.
What?
Weird.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Wow.
It's statistically,
I haven't heard of that, but that's interesting.
Statistically provable. They shut that system down, and things went slowly back to where they weren't late again. But the parents appreciated.
So they were basically saying like, "Oh, you mean you'll watch my kids for this price?" Cool.
So if we live in an overregulated society where our tax dollars and fines are meant to take over our human impulse to help each other, what we'll end up with is a system where we see that as an excuse from our moral impulses, as an excuse from our obligations to one another.
Because there's a rule about it that some people disassociate.
If we regulate good behavior, we'll end up with bad, because the Cobra effect is ubiquitous.
That's what happens with big government, though. So when I got into foster care work, part of our training was we had to learn about the history of foster care, and it actually started with animal control. There was a group of children who were being kept under a home, filthy, wild, mistreated, beaten, not underfed, all this. And the community, which usually these kind of things, if something happened, like the mother died and the dad was a drunk and nobody to take care of the kids, usually the church was usually the center of every community. And there was family that would help, or the church would bring food at times of crisis, or the church would, come help somebody build a barn together. Like the small communities, there was accountability because everybody knew each other and everybody was mostly related to each other. And you wanted to do business with your community member, whatever.
Right. And you let your neighbors know when their teenagers were being assholes,
right.
because
there's accountability,
you cared
and
about
matters.
the whole
That's
person in that community.
And they understood that the health of the community affects everyone. And that's where we've gotten so big. And so anyway, they told us, like back in the 1920s or whatever, so they called animal welfare to pick up these kids. And then from there, foster care was, and Department of Human Services, child welfare was birthed. And all of a sudden, so then government starts doing these jobs that a community used to do. And then they start saying, well, now we tax you because we do these jobs for you. And all of a sudden people get self-righteous and, well, that's why I pay my taxes. And I don't have to care anymore about that little kid who doesn't have parents. I don't have to care anymore about that elderly veteran who fought all his life for our freedom. I don't have to care anymore about teachers that are, educating our children. I don't have to care about all these things, who's going to pick up my trash and how my neighborhood looks or whatever those things are, because I pay my taxes.
Right. And I'm entitled to men with guns to come stop this behavior.
Yes.
When the people who take the money, right, to solve these problems don't do it. But the problems never get solved, right? It's like, the fastest way to make sure
it was never the money. It's about people caring for each other. That's how you fix it.
Right. Yeah. The fastest way to make sure that like roadsides get filthy is you give the state responsibility for having people convicted of crimes clean it up, and you put a sign up that says that's what's happening. Then nobody volunteers, right? It's not trusting the volunteer society to take care of things. is a big problem with this. And I think that's sort of the game over situation, is where, we like our prison cells so much that we absolve ourselves of all responsibility to each other. Because people, the weirdest thing is people think that individualists, like ANCAPs and agorists and people who want a free society that is unregulated want chaos. No, we don't. None of us do. I can speak for myself. I can speak for the good people that I know who are into that. What we want is for people to not feel like somebody else is taking care of it, in a sense. Like we want to be able to take responsibility for ourselves without stepping on the toes of some regulator who's going to arrest us for being good people. Like the kind of stuff happens. You can't go out and legally fill a pothole in a community yourself. You'll get arrested, for example. So,
and you'll put yourself up for a risk of lawsuit
right,
if you
exactly.
improve the community. Yeah.
It's madness. It's madness.
Don't build a swing set in a park. You will be liable.
Yeah. So we have a chance to avoid that right now by building these systems and not giving up, but also just never absolving ourselves of moral responsibility for bads we see going on in the world. And that's something you can do without a blockchain. So let's move on to the next question, though. That was a really good one. Thanks for that, Jacob Blaine. Okay, so we've got Juicy J now asks, how can state governments address the interoperability challenges that arise from using different blockchain systems?
Tough one.
I have a 2-word answer. If you guys want to hear mine first, then we can discuss it.
Sure.
Open source. That's the answer.
Yeah. The interoperability challenges. What was the question? How do they address the interoperability challenges?
Yep.
Think of one county using a blockchain and a city within that county using a different blockchain, but they still got to communicate.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll go from an angle that we're not going to like, because we should probably look at both ends of this. One way to address the interoperability challenges from using different blockchain systems is to require that everyone goes through a central authority to pass traffic between each of them, right? This could be like a KYC. We have to know what all is going on everywhere. And it becomes the standard, and then everybody uses that system. And if you are caught using something that is outside of this centrally glued together system, then you're fined or you're charged somehow or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is being tried already. And I think that at least in the EU, that there is a push for, and this isn't with blockchains, but with messaging apps, with communications networks and things like that. In the name of interoperability, there's a lot of interest on requiring companies to be compatible with each other so that you can pass messages between different messaging apps and things like that. And depending on who's designing that system, it can either be done in a way that makes sense and is safe and still works very well, or it can be designed in a way that is a surveillance tool.
Right.
So I guess it depends on who's doing the solution, who's designing the solution.
It's a really good point, Dave. And just to add on to that, like who's doing the designing and what are their lowest level constraints? What do we tell our government they're allowed to order from the people who build these things? And I think we have to be very, very careful to make sure that the vendors that they're using are building, like I said, to expand on the open source thing, with open source software, and that they are using established protocols and not reinventing the wheel to build something to spec. They should not be ordering bespoke systems that do exactly what they want out of the box. They should be adapting general systems that everybody can build from as a toolkit, right? If they do that, then interoperability will be an emergent property as opposed to a thing they actually actively have to build and manage. And
so you're saying basically that government should be, if they're enforcing anything, it should be enforcing a capability and not a specific method to implement the capability.
It should
they should get out of engineering
on what kind of contractors they're allowed to hire. You shouldn't be able to go get Microsoft to do a bespoke thing for just your state in a special exclusive project.
So like the digital ID thing.
Because what you'll end up with is 5 years later, after they get done doing the DMV, they'll move on to the Public Records Department or the Department of Deeds, and they'll hire a different contractor, and that contractor will do it differently. And it's all closed source, so you can't adapt it. And you end up with these these stupid issues like how do you make a Word document open cleanly in
like
Apple
LibreOffice or
Pages,
something.
like
Yeah.
And those kinds of things hold up the interoperability question. Like, and those
what you describe is
level,
yeah,
right?
what you describe is how it works today from the way that technologies are purchased with tax dollars is they're I mean, that's how our system was. We had, whenever I was working back to Tomahawk, I guess, but that system itself, it's different today than whenever I was in, but it used to be several different proprietary systems that interoperated on the same network.
Right.
And
how do you propose to solve this for us is a publication they make. And then
we were basically just
write a custom proposal like that.
Yeah, we were stuck with however that vendor wanted. Like we were so reliant, we were hamstrung. Basically, we were relying on that piece of software, and we weren't allowed to know how. Like we had the source code ourselves, I guess, but it's just I don't know the way that it was decided upon.
Having the source code and knowing how to interact with it without their help is a different animal.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe it doesn't beg to this question, but there's two things. One is we're looking for transparency, right, in our government. And when you said open source, my first thought was, okay, yeah, transparency is also. So that's what we're really striving for. But we also have to keep in mind that in this day and time, blockchain is not the solution for everything. Now, sorry, crypto folks.
Very true.
I'll put on my bulletproof vest here, but
no, you're right.
Blockchain is not the number one cure-all, solve everything. Even though I wear the decentralized everything shirt, is my favorite shirt. It's just not. It's not as efficient. It's not scalable at this point, shall we say? But it lends us.
Depends on how you're
designed
it.
But I mean, if your T-shirt was saying the honest truth, it would be not a good slogan, and it would say something like "Decentralize what you can, federalize the rest, and only build bespoke systems at the very top layer of your stack." That doesn't make a very good T-shirt. But
I am is right though. Like blockchain is a tool that can help us better decentralize. It gives us a capability to decentralize, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that I think that he's right exactly.
Database. So
in the suggestion that making everything a blockchain system should not be the goal. The goal should be decentralizing everything, and a blockchain system is something that you can use that's new and very interesting and useful and handy and efficient.
And one day I think we will use blockchains for everything instead of databases, right?
To allow you to get closer to that end goal.
Which then we're talking about, interoperability between blockchain and non-blockchain, right? So we have that as well to deal with, other than just blockchain to blockchain.
Sure.
Right. So
and one of the things,
Juicy J's question here, it is a huge challenge. Without, and that technology isn't seamless and doesn't exist today.
But if they use the RPC spec instead of inventing like Microsoft's specialized signal service version 1.5 on this particular Windows kernel, then they're going to be making interoperability problems that they can't solve, right?
I disagree that the interoperability and the scalability doesn't exist today. I think it absolutely is available today. I think that it's being hamstrung. I think it's being slowed down and it's being sued by the SEC. I think that people are afraid to build on it because they don't know if they're going to go up against some arbitrary rule that nobody knew existed until all of a sudden they cross that threshold. Right?
We're going to solve that one real soon, though, guys.
Yeah, there's some great cross-chain projects. There's a really great decentralized cross-chain project called FIBO that has almost every coin, and no one's in charge of it, which is why they have no marketing.
You can
nobody knows about it.
You can interoperate. You can. I'll give a shout out to Dragon Chain because you can interop with anything. With that system, you can interop with an old mainframe system. You can interop with the existing Dominion voting machines. You can interop with stuff instead of having to redesign everything from the ground up. You can bolt it on. You can just attach it to what already exists. Right. So you can interop if you. I mean, it's a patented capability, and some people don't like that a patent exists on that. but it exists. It is available and it is able to be used. And it's
Ultimately,
licensed, and you can buy a license to use it. Now the SEC
Ultimately,
might think that license is something that it's not, but that's where the problem comes from: government intervening, either not understanding or fully understanding what they're doing, and stopping capability from being developed as quickly as it could be.
I would say too that the governments that requisition these things know exactly what they're doing to a certain degree, right? A lot of the contracting value add for legislatures and for the agencies that they're requisitioning for, right? These things are of value to them primarily because there's somebody else to blame when it breaks, right? And if that is a black box to the public, that is a value add to the product when it comes to deflecting blame when something breaks, right? If it's built on an open protocol and everybody can see it and everybody knows how it works in the larger tech community, right? It's a lot easier to see if they're full of shit, and the critics will come after them if they're doing something like running an open source system, and they use the RPC protocol wrong. That's negligence that they should have seen because any expert could see, right? But if it's some bespoke thing that they hire, a special division of Microsoft to do, then it's a black box, right? You don't even know how that stuff works.
Yeah, and you
It's
can
not
blame that
working
box,
right.
and you can blame that company. You can say it's not my fault because it's their responsibility and that kind of thing. That reminds me of something. You and I am both like, this is actually a pretty good conversation because it just reminds me of what pisses me off about the situation that we're in a lot. And I think, another angle on this question, on Juicy J's question, is that it could very well be that the challenges of interoperability among blockchain systems is not what we think it is. It could be that a centralized power structure sees interoperability as a danger to their control, right? And this is getting a little bit tinfoil hat, I guess. But, what if you're looking at a system? What if you're on the top looking at your subjects, thinking if they can interop with us while also using a parallel system, if they can do something that's outside of the system, and then they can still use that in the system whenever they want, how do we control what people are doing, right?
Right. An open,
you're
losing public API to your government is the best thing you could possibly have, right? So that programmers can build all that they want to show people what's going on.
But what I'm saying is that the problem could be, from a certain point of view, the problem could be that it is interoperable, that you can make it interoperable, right?
So the problem is relinquishing control.
Yeah, letting people do whatever they want on whatever blockchain network they want, or any kind of network they want, and then at any point in time to be able to take whatever value has been created or traded on that network and then put it into a bank or put it into a database that's in a traditional legacy system, and they can come and go as they please without being controlled every step of the way. Maybe that's the real problem with interoperability, is that it is interoperable.
Oh, there's certainly,
or maybe the real problem is a standard database that can be altered and changed, and historical records can be altered, and they don't want that. They want to have that ability to go back in time and fuck it up.
So that could be one of the motivating factors.
And that's why you need at least a change control data store, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a blockchain, but there needs to be change control.
Interesting.
Lack of trust.
Yeah. But no, the interoperability thing, one way that a state government can address the challenges of interoperability, I would say, is to stop fighting it. Stop fighting it. Stop trying to kill it. Stop trying to make it not exist. Stop trying to make sure that all your buddies get control of it before regular people are allowed to use it in any way. That kind of thing. Just stop. Just stop getting in the fucking way, and it'll happen.
Yep.
Wouldn't they be able to
leverage our democratic process to enforce it on the legislatures, so that they have no choice but to stay away from some big bright red lines that are gonna, when they cross them, make the problems happen for sure. Yeah, because those exist, right? Like we could enumerate them if we wanted to be really boring about the show. But
would similar solutions be like how they got interoperability when email started happening? between AOL, Gmail,
Standards.
stuff like that.
That was the beauty of email, right?
Would
It's a
that
protocol.
be a similar solution?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it could
We
be
have
an
to be
offering.
using
Yeah.
protocols that are open to make these things happen, right? If it's not on an open protocol, you're screwed from day one for interoperability. And email was neat because it was anybody could set up software to use it, right? It didn't matter what the brand was. The protocol itself was public and free, and anybody could build a client for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's in sort of a similar way is kind of how like blockchains networks within themselves, within their own ecosystem, sort of have that going on, where anybody can write a program that is a node, as long as it communicates with this protocol in this way. In it, like it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be like the Bitcoin core node that you download from Bitcoin.com or something.
Right.
You can literally go write your own.
There's a client written in Python. There's a client written in like 15 different programming languages.
Yeah. So what doesn't what's less common is protocols that different disconnected infrastructures agree to use so that they can all interoperate.
Right. It's sort of like the difference between, I think this is a really good analogy. Roads are built a certain way in this country, and we all know what a highway looks like. It doesn't matter what they make the asphalt out of to whether or not the highway works. So you hire somebody to make a highway, just make sure that they follow the road design, the basic big strip of pavement, dashes down the middle where appropriate, white lines down the middle where appropriate. It needs to interconnect, but it doesn't have to be made of the same material. It doesn't have to be the same color per se. Like the details we typically involve ourselves with, to the exclusion of interop when it comes to tech. If you built highway systems like that, it would be a circus.
I guess that's interesting. That's pretty good because that's in a way that's why you're able to build self-driving cars in the first place.
Right.
It's because you have this sort of protocol of what a road is and how it works.
Yeah, exactly. We just need to make sure that we have those clearly defined, or at least we define that they're required to find the definitions of the protocol before they move forward. So that was a great question.
Good information.
Thank you for that one, Juicy J. So let's see what Chad has to ask us here. Question: can blockchain technology stop a tyrannical government or limit them?
No, we're doomed. We're doomed. We're all gonna die.
Game over, man. Game over. I don't know, man. It's a good question. Like it can, if you develop a brand new government from the ground up based on that. If you go start your own nation state and you say from the very beginning, we're going to build on blockchain technology and everything's going to be structured in a way that we have rules in software and compute power and consensus and mathematics that dictate what the government can and can't do. But right now, I don't know. How do you take something that's built on violence and built on kinetic power?
So I was going to say, devil's
projection.
advocate, Dave. I'm going to send the bombers in. I'm going to send the troops in. I'm going to smash it. This whole idea of individual sovereignty is done.
Yeah, so that's the issue. How do you take a world that exists today and start and how do you integrate controls on an uncontrolled system? I guess that's the question.
And that's what parallel systems are all about, right? Technically, we don't need the internet that has the deep sea cables that run through endpoints at GCHQ and the CIA when they cross the Atlantic, right? All we need are the protocols that we've already got and a set of radios that aren't plugged into it, installed on all of your neighbors' roofs, and you can have a local internet that the NSA isn't spying on until they come in and try to find a way to. If you build it from the base up with end-to-end encryption, and you make it very, very difficult to get onto the network with a mind to dominate it, right? This is where blockchains can come in. Then we can rebuild a separate internet right alongside the existing one. And there's nothing they can do to stop it. Now, that said, the blockchain can help you stop a tyrannical government, but the only way to stop a tyrannical government is people. Like, it's up to you. You have to decide to not prop up your tyrant anymore. All you have to do is not comply. It's a numbers game, isn't it?
It's a numbers game. It's the enough people to rise up
until we choose. Yeah.
Etienne Lebody got it right.
Yeah, my
he
point
said that-
earlier, the higher the, or as to, as tyranny rises, well, so do parallel systems rise. And that's where a balance kind of happens, because then the parallel system overtakes. And that's throughout history. That's really kind of the driving force, because people become disenchanted, then they become distrustful, and then they disobey their government.
Right.
And how do they do all of that? They start building a parallel system. They start counter economics. They vote with their wallet. They vote with their feet.
Mm-hmm.
They do all of these things that move them away from and out from underneath the control of a government. And that's what's really ultimately stops, a tyrannical government or a dictator.
Yep.
But we're also entering the what? What do they say? Weak times create weak men. Or shall I say weak people?
Or no. It's good times create weak men.
Oh yeah, there you go.
If we're comfortable, we create.
I've jumped ahead.
Right, yeah.
in the cycle, jumping ahead in the cycle.
I like can help in one particular way, right?
Okay.
If we ever wanted to stage, and I'm not advocating this because this is the single scariest thing to say in public, and I'm definitely not advocating this. I can't stress that enough. NSA handlers who are watching this show right now, and CIA and whoever else is watching, you guys, this is satire and a joke and not meant to be taken as a serious admonition. But blockchains could make it possible, if we were using them as currency and a store of wealth, to stage a very large scale tax revolt. And it won't be very long before the tanks stop running, so to speak, because they need our money in order to stay alive.
Well,
I argue with that. I'll push back.
I got a printer there.
I would love to see that science fiction play out. Okay.
Right.
I would love to see that on the big screen. But I will say that the pushback is they're still printing the money. And as long as they can print the money, maybe they can still buy the oil for those tanks. So I don't, they're still.
I don't know. Saudi Arabia is moving to
required to
bricks.
drive them.
Yes.
Go to the local store with those bucks, and the store refuses it because it has the tyrant stamp on it. So
Here's
you got any Bitcoin, because that's all we take.
Yeah, here's a fictional scenario on that note. Greg,
that's how blockchains can do it.
Where now I'll say two words that could mean anything you want, because I know everybody has their favorite blockchains and their favorite cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. I'll say Bitcoin, but you can use Litecoin, you can use whatever currency you want. And I'll say Monero, and you can use anything. You can use Litecoin with Mimblewimble, you can use Grin, you can use Zcash, whatever. But those are my two favorites. So that's what I'll use in the example. So a scenario where Bitcoin is used for all public government type transactions, paying taxes, paying for infrastructure with the taxes, stuff like that. And Monero is used for the people, for everyday users. You're paid in Monero, you use it at the store, stuff like that. And anytime you pay your taxes, you atomic swap into Bitcoin or something like that and pay them in Bitcoin, so that you can then have transparency in government, right? With Bitcoin being a network that is transparent, and you're able to track everything, as we've seen with NFTs coming to Bitcoin, which we should have maybe talked about in one of the current events kind of thing. So that's an interesting, hilarious situation to me. But yeah, everything is traceable. The DEA loves people to commit crimes with Bitcoin because they can trace everything, right? Mm-hmm. So that should be what the government is made to use. And then the people can use something like Monero that is private, that is secure, that is going to protect the citizens, because that's what it's designed for, is to just be a safe, functional currency. And just those two, right? So that instead of a CBDC, we could do that. And that could go a long way, just because of transparency for the right people in the right situations, and just because of privacy for the right people in the right situations. Yeah. That could go a long way to limit tyranny.
Right. It doesn't have to be one solution either, right? Like, not just your preference, Dave, but everybody's preference can be accommodated. Because right now, like, there are people out there who would take frequent flyer miles in payment if it was from the right airline, if you were allowed, in fact, to transfer them, like, I know tons of people who'd be like, really? You'll give me frequent flyer miles? I will give you all of my backyard chicken egg harvest, as long as you don't live in Ohio, because they can't do that anymore. Sorry, but is it too soon?
No, it's okay. It's okay. By the way, I'm going to have to leave soon because I got a truckload of eggs coming from Mexico.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
There you go.
We buy ours at the farmer's market, which is a parallel system. I think I am for I am. You're the first person I saw point out a farmer's market as a parallel system, but you're absolutely right. Not the first person that's done it, but I just hadn't thought of it that way until you said it. And we buy our eggs at the farmer's market, but we have to buy them as pet snacks. There's a big label on them, not for human consumption. They're pet snacks. You know what I mean?
I told my mom about
the eggs
that.
haven't been around for thousands of years. You know, all of a sudden they're unsafe if you don't go through a particular like agency or process.
FDA stamping. It's all about getting the, paying the middleman, which we talked about earlier, and they all want those middlemen. They want you to come and get your license and pay the fee and keep perpetuating those.
They want an address on
that tyranny,
so they
the
can send them in with
hierarchy
guns
on
there
them.
easily.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, Dave, that is exactly that. It's that tyranny of you can't buy eggs from some Joe Blow vendor over here.
You can't buy eggs from a farmer. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I buy his chickens. Why can't I buy his chickens' eggs?
The tyranny. See, so the tyranny and
the bureaucrats help make them safer somehow.
Eggs. Yeah, it's crazy. It's
crazy. What could a bureaucrat possibly do to those eggs before they let them into the stores that make them safer somehow?
No, they don't. They make them less safe. This is the issue I have, because in the United States, or at least in Florida, you have to make the eggs less safe before you're allowed to sell them legally.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Because what we do is we scrub them and clean them, right, to get the membranes off, and then we put them in a refrigerated situation where it has to maintain a certain temperature over a period of time. Because if it doesn't, now that you've removed the egg's natural protection that it has when it comes out of the chicken, you have to then create an environment where things can't grow that could get you sick, right? Whereas if you go to Europe, like every time I visit my family in Germany, I'm reminded when I go into the market, into the supermarket, into the store, there's eggs that are just on the shelf at room temperature, not in the fridge. They're just out on the shelf. They're just hanging out, being eggs like they do in nature, and they're fine. And everybody keeps their eggs on the counter in the kitchen outside the refrigerator because they have a smaller fridge. They don't need so many things refrigerated, And
it's like when they banned the baby formula.
Why are
we
making this
it didn't have a label
problem that doesn't exist? That kind of thing. Anyway, there's my rant on eggs.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more quick one, and then we got to end the show because we're getting close. Okay, and we got an awesome one.
Question.
I'm going to read this clearly as I can. Money and party politics set the agendas, right? Legislative agendas and bills that become laws are determined mostly by corporation and interest groups. They seem to drive what goes into and out of committees. Unfortunately, direct citizen input has been dramatically reduced over the years. This is true even at the state level. In summary, there is a third party between the representative and representatives' constituents, party leaders, and lobbyists. Question: can you see any alternative solutions other than blockchain that will fix our political systems, because what we're doing currently isn't working?
Yeah. Well, there's solutions.
I like autocracy, honestly. I like the idea of sortition as a way to elect representatives in an elected government. Because if you don't have elections, you don't have career politicians. You're just picking a random sampling of the population. Like you sign up for jury duty, you become a legislator. I think if we did that, and if we did that also within legislatures at the leadership and committee level, like you don't have a leader of the House or the Senate, you just have the committees get appointed by sortition. To me, it would screw up their entire power game. And yes, sometimes you get some morons.
I was going to say, wow.
That's exactly.
But that is way less dangerous than somebody who's motivated by a special interest. I'd rather have a stupid person than a person being willfully blind because that's what the moneyed interest wants.
But do you not think the money would still go, and then the money's going to the stupid person who's just as easily swayed? Well, like the lobbyist still exists in that situation.
The only reason they're allowed to take money at all is because they have to campaign.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It would take away the cover of the corruption. There wouldn't be good, fair, or even unpalatable.
It's the only reason now. But if in your scenario, there would be a new reason, because now they can pay dumb people to be swayed.
Oh, no. I mean, we can structure the system in such a way that I believe that would be better than what we have now.
Yeah.
That's something that's
would
important to
argue
keep in
that
mind
has
too. I
to-
think is to improve upon things. I personally am also guilty of this, but it's common to let perfection get in the way of improvement or progress.
Mm.
And so anytime I think about stuff like this, it's like, okay, what steps can we take to improve shit, even if it doesn't fix shit, but if it
But would
improves
it be
it,
better?
that kind of thing. And then we do a bunch of those things and we iterate upon that, kind of like software development, where you get something, sort of working, and then you iterate on it because you find out, okay, well, that works except for in this fringe case or this edge case. And then you iterate, and eventually you got a system that's solid and it works. That's probably the way to do it. Otherwise, you're talking about revolution and gutting the system and then putting in something else that may or may not be any better.
Like going back to the original founding fathers idea and
Well, if we
Yeah.
did
not
Jefferson's
having two
rewrite
parties.
idea, it could be dangerous in that respect, right?
Well, that's my point. Where in summary, we have between us and our representative, we have third parties. We have counterparties to us that are between us and our representative now, which is the money, the lobbyists, the special interest, and the party politics. The party leaders are telling our representative, no, you're going to vote our way. You're going to stay in the line, stay within
or
the
you
party.
lose the election
And
money
that's
support.
where the issue is we don't have true representation anymore, at least direct representation. Sure, you can get an appointment with your state legislator, on a good day and say, hey, I got a little bit of concern here about this, and that.
Right.
What are you
They'll
going to do
smile
about
and
it?
nod at you. Yeah.
And they're going to go, well, I'm really busy. We'll try to take your concerns into account, unless you got a really, really awesome personal story, in which case we'll bring you in for resolution and make a show pony out of you. But the only way you actually get something done is if you bust out a checkbook.
Right. When I was with a large transportation firm that would be well known, 3-letter name, but anyway, we used to, that was the knock at the door was, hi, I'm from such and such company, and in our district we hire 12,000 individuals in your congressional district. Can we get an appointment?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you say 12,000? Sure, of course. How about 2 hours from now?
Right.
But if I walked in the door and said, hi, I'm just, I live in your district and me and my family are concerned about this, and this. Can we get an appointment?
Yeah.
Our appointment book is a little full right now.
Would you like to meet one of my aides?
Bingo. And that's where we don't have that representation anymore. And that's at the state level. Can you meet with your mayor?
Probably.
I
council
can.
person?
It depends on where you live.
If your mayor lives down the street from you, you can probably meet with your mayor, whether they want you to or not.
Or if you're LBJ and your next door neighbor happens to be, I don't know, the guy in charge of the FBI pre-Kennedy assassination, just happened to say in that, kind of curious.
Was he
You
wearing
can have
high
that
heels
conversation.
at the time?
Hey, did you cut your lawn today? Oh yeah, I'm cutting my lawn.
Well, that's why I think that this is maybe not completely on the topic of the question, but like voting locally, it's way more accessible to go down to City Hall and knock on the door and get one of your one of the city council seats, or one of maybe the mayor themselves, that kind of thing. But this is also these are also the people that get less of a voter turnout, like these local elections, the city elections and things like that. People don't participate in hyper local governance as much as they turn out every 4 years to vote for a president or something of the federal government.
Well, that is actually one fair thing to say about local, though. You can get a large enough crowd to scare them into doing what you want easier. Grassroots is much easier.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is it's more? It arguably affects you more. Local politics affects you directly, and you have more of an opportunity to directly affect it. But it's simultaneously the most neglected participation rate.
Yep.
But you've made the point that smaller government is better in one aspect of it. You can say because that gives you a little bit better representation.
Yep.
And so in this radical idea of going back to our science fiction novel or movie that we want to see, the radical idea is that A, money doesn't flow to the politician, and B, the radical idea of maybe money shouldn't be in the hands of government or a pseudo agency of government, That's radical in our science fiction film, right?
Getting politics out of money as opposed to the inverse.
Yes. And so I think that's kind of, well, on my white paper is just about that, is getting that representative to not represent the lobbyist or the party, limiting that party, politics. If you take those two elements out of the picture, then they're answering to the constituent. I think that is well down the road of part of that solution of transparency in government.
And one of the
absolutely, and I think that's actually a good point to go out on here because you're actually actively working on that right now. I mentioned at the start of the show, but since we're winding down here, maybe just tell people about it real quick, and then we can move on to Dave and Lisa, and then I'll send us home.
Cool. Well, the draft just went up on the website. It's draft 2.0, and the website is lessmoneyinpolitics.org. So it's a draft of the white paper. It's got a kind of the section where it outlines the white paper. It's all there for everyone to see and take a look at. And I'm definitely starting my channel so I can start talking about it. But there it is. Hey, I put this website together myself. I've never put a website together myself before. So it was kind of a fun thing.
I've seen worse pro websites done.
So it took me about
I worked in government, so have I.
But there's your summary right there. I can't guarantee it's going to look pretty on your phone or anything like that, but it's a draft. And the white paper's there for everyone to look at. It's got me excited to get about an opportunity, a fix, so potential. Yep. If anything, let's start poking holes at it and talking about it and
have a conversation.
There we go.
Yeah.
I've been giving it a close read, and I will have something hopefully by the end of my day, as long as things don't go sideways for you. But this is a cool project. You guys should all check it out.
Very cool.
So, Dave, what about you?
Yeah. Funny enough, yesterday I met with a guy that I know in town who ran for mayor recently and is looking at doing it again, maybe a different office, maybe the same one. And I was talking to him about that white paper specifically. And I said, hey, what do you think about this? And he thought it was interesting and novel. So I, that needs to get proven somewhere and shown to work, so that other people can look at it and say, actually, hey, that's kind of a neat idea. Maybe we should do this. One of the things I like about it is that even if it doesn't fix everything, it at least, even if everything stays the same, just as corrupt and awful as it is, it would at least make the influence pay the constituents to influence them directly. It would make the money flow through the local economies that then have to, in other words, your propaganda has to benefit people at the very least, which is also an improvement.
Yeah, exactly. If you're at least part of the treasury on voting,
So
if the treasury gets corrupted, then
that's why I think it's a winner. Even if it doesn't work, it still works. It's still better.
Yeah,
so
I like it because it's
like it a lot.
New, and trying the same old things is obviously not helping us.
Other than that, we're doing a governance call at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, in the Den DAO layer on Den Social. It'll also be up on Den Social's YouTube channel and up on Twitter and stuff like that. Just a quick update. We're working on economy reputation stuff and leaderboard metrics. The latest thing that we've done that I was working on actually right up until this show was getting a way to, without speculation, to value an NFT, a token, and it's working. Cool. So that's cool. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit. It's not ready yet, but it's working.
Cool. That's exciting. Lisa, what about you? What's new?
Yeah, I've had some really great interviews lately. I had to put my Jim Willie interview on Patreon, which challenged me with my website. I had to create a new page on my website, like coinlisa.net, and I created a Patreon only page and password protected it. So you have to join my Patreon. That way it supports my channel and the work that I do. But I put those crazy Jim Willie interviews with the things that he says that I cannot have on most platforms. I immediately deleted
He's
off
great.
YouTube. Yeah,
He's a hoot.
he's amazing, and he's texting me this morning with more information. So that'll be a regular thing for my patrons. And then Andy Scheckman from Miles Franklin Mint was on yesterday.
Cool.
And he's going to start coming on weekly, doing an update on my regular channel. So I post those all on the Mighty Layer at Den Social. You guys can find it there as well. So all good stuff.
I highly recommend
day,
everybody check that out
day.
too, because Lisa's always got so many irons in the fire that if you're not keeping track, you will lose track and you'll be missing out on some cool stuff, because you may literally miss out on one of her initiatives that is right up your alley. And if you're not paying attention, then you won't get a chance to be a part of it. So, so definitely pay attention to Lisa, because she's a dynamo. So at that, I'll tell you guys a bit about what I'm up to. Rivet is going to be at ETH Denver, and we are going to be bringing something new into the world with respect to how one thinks about infrastructure for decentralized systems. And if we are appropriately good and cautious and smart about it, which we will try to do to the best of our capacity, right? We could be introducing truly decentralized infrastructure into the world. A thing where if you want to build a decentralized app, that it will no longer be sufficient to go to us or to Amazon or whoever and point a gun at them at a court order and say, stop this and take it down. You can build on whatever you want, and the systems themselves can be structured such that if they come after Rivet and Rivet gets shut down, the marketplace protocol will keep running. So it could be a very powerful tool in the tool chest of people who want to see the world get away from that controlled by sort of violent siege of the physical infrastructure. So we're super excited about it and looking forward to bringing that news to more people. But
when is that launch?
We're going to be talking about it. The very first part of the discussions about it are going to be sort of public and happening at ETH Denver on March 1st and 2nd. And there probably will be a live stream to some of the workshops we'll be doing with some partners that we're excited to be working with, that people will not believe we're working with, but are involved in doing this the right way, to the point where we're super excited and kind of mind blown about what's about to happen. It's hard not to be too hypey about it, but I'm trying my best not to get people too overexcited in advance.
Sounds exactly like what we need. Things that can just exist. Things that kind of like,
Yep. Anyway, at that, thank you guys for watching. We're glad to have you here. We're glad to have all the awesome questions we had today. Great discussion. Be sure to remember to like, share, follow the channel. I found out the other day that if you don't have more than 1,000 channel subscribers, they limit your views under 600 or 700. So you can't have more than that number of viewers if you don't have that many subscribers. I tried to watch the Super Bowl on YouTube, and somebody's watch party was blocked from having new joiners. So, in any case, you guys have a great day. Share this, send it out. That's how we get rewards. That's how we spread the good word, and keep building.
While nuclear weapons states can exert unlimited violence over even millions of individuals, strong cryptography means that a state, even by exercising unlimited violence, cannot violate the intent of individuals to keep secrets from them. Cryptography is the ultimate form of non-violent direct action.